Dusk came purple over Salt Fork, Idaho, and the girl was already out among the goats, barefoot, a cowbell in each hand. She walked the fence line slow, tapping the wire with a stick, and behind her, single file, 6 goats followed like soldiers on watch, not grazing, not wandering, walking. Their hooves fell in a rhythm steady as a clock. The girl stopped at the corner post. The lead goat stopped too. She rang the bell twice. The goat lifted its head toward the tree line and held still, ears forward, nostrils working the wind. From the porch, her father watched with his coffee going cold in his hand. He didn't call out. He'd stopped asking questions 2 weeks back. Down the road, a neighbor slowed his truck at the fence, squinted, shook his head, and drove on without waving. The girl kept walking, kept ringing. The mountains behind her were already losing their light, and somewhere up in that dark timber, something was watching back. Nobody in Salt Fork could explain what that girl was training her goats to do, or why she seemed to be running out of time to finish it. If you're new here, this is the kind of story we tell: quiet places, stubborn people, and the moments that prove them right. Hit subscribe if you want more of these. Drop a comment with the town or state you're watching from tonight, and let's get into it. Custer County sits high and lonesome in central Idaho, where the Salmon River cuts through granite and the winters arrive like a debt collector, early and without mercy. The town of Salt Fork had one gas station, one church, and a grazing allotment system that decided who ate that year and who didn't. Wrenna was 13 years old, and she had lived her whole life on land her family didn't fully own, federal range, leased by the season, grazed by permit. Her father, Gideon, ran 40 head of sheep and a small herd of dairy goats on that lease, same as his father had. 2 winters back, Wrenna's mother, Adali, had died of a fever that came on fast and left just as fast, taking half the house's laughter with her. After that, Gideon got quieter. He still made coffee for 2 every morning out of habit, then poured the second cup down the sink. Wrenna noticed. She never said anything. She just started setting only 1 cup out herself, so he wouldn't have to see the extra. Then came the trouble that mattered to the whole county. Wolves had drifted down from the wilderness boundary the year before, thinning what remained of the elk herds and turning their attention to easier meals. Gideon lost 11 ewes in a single spring. Desperate and against every posted regulation, he'd fired on a wolf pack crossing his lease at dusk. He hadn't killed one, but a range rider saw the muzzle flash and reported it, and that was enough. The county's Grazing Review Board, run by a tight-lipped range officer named Merle Kepner, suspended the Tessic's lethal control rights for 1 full season. No shooting, no trapping, no poison, not even on their own leased ground. If they couldn't prove, by first snowfall, that they'd found another way to hold their flock, the permit would be revoked at the fall hearing, and the family's herd would go to auction before Christmas. Gideon's grandmother, Vernis, who still lived in the old cabin down the draw, said it plain over supper one night. "They've took away the only thing that ever worked and dared us to find something better." Nobody at that table had an answer. Not yet. It was Wrenna who found it, though not the way anyone expected. She'd been reading an old library book about herding dogs used overseas when she came across one line about certain goats, Alpine Cross, sharp-eyed, herd-bonded, that could be trained to patrol a boundary the way a dog might if you built the habit slow enough and rewarded it right. She read that line 4 times. Then she went out to the barn where her 6 young dairy goats stood chewing at nothing in particular, and she said out loud to no one, "All right, let's see." She started with a bell and a bucket of grain. Every evening, same hour, she'd walk the fence line ringing that bell and drop a handful of feed at each corner post. The goats followed for the food. That was all it was at first, just goats following a girl for grain. Her little brother, Bertie, 8 years old and missing his front teeth, thought it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. "You're teaching goats to go for a walk," he said, laughing so hard he nearly fell off the fence rail. "That ain't training, Wrenna. That's just goats being goats." But Wrenna kept at it. Week after week, she shortened the grain, lengthened the walk, and taught the lead goat, a scarred old nanny named Clementine, half blind in one eye and twice as stubborn as anybody in the family, to stop and hold at each post until Wrenna rang the bell a second time. Slowly, the herd began to mirror Clementine. They stopped chewing brush at random. They stopped scattering when a hawk's shadow crossed the pasture. They started watching the tree line the way Wrenna watched it herself. The neighbors noticed before her own father fully did. Odell Fescue, who ran cattle 2 sections over and had known the Tessicks 30 years, stopped his truck at the fence one evening and watched Wrenna ring her bell for a full 5 minutes before he said a word. "Girl," he finally called out, "you do know goats don't guard nothing. They're prey animals same as your sheep. You're wasting good grain training something that's gonna run the second a wolf shows its teeth." Wrenna didn't look up. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe they just never had a reason to stand before." Gideon overheard that exchange from the barn doorway and said nothing to either of them. That night, though, he pulled a chair out onto the porch and watched his daughter work the fence line until dark swallowed her shape entirely, and the only proof she was still out there was the bell. Through the middle of summer, the training held steady, and Wrenna added new pieces, teaching the goats to bunch tight and face outward when she blew a short whistle, rewarding stillness over movement, rewarding watching over grazing. She kept a torn notebook page tacked to the barn wall with checkmarks for every evening she'd walked the line. By August, there were 41 checkmarks in a row. Then the dry spell hit. Late August brought a heat that scorched the high pasture brown, and with it came a grasshopper plague that stripped what little grass remained near the fence corners, the very spot Wrenna needed the goats calm and stationed. Feed prices at the co-op jumped overnight, and Gideon, already stretched thin buying hay to carry the sheep through, told Wrenna flat out one evening that he couldn't keep buying grain for what he called an experiment. "I'm not saying stop," he told her, not unkindly. "I'm saying we may not have the money to keep proving a thing that might not prove out anyhow." That night Wrenna sat in the barn a long time, notebook in her lap, 41 checkmarks staring back at her, and for the first time all summer, she didn't walk the fence line. Bertie found her there past dark, and instead of teasing her for once he just sat down beside her in the straw. "Clementine still comes to the gate every evening," he said quietly. "Even when you don't." Wrenna looked up. He was right. She could hear the old nanny's bell already, faint, restless, waiting by the corner post for a routine nobody had canceled but her. Wrenna wiped her face on her sleeve, took the bucket down off its nail, and walked out into the dark to ring the bell one more time. She didn't miss another evening after that. By late September, the review hearing loomed 2 weeks off, and frost had begun silvering the grass by morning. Merle Kepner drove out once to inspect the property, clipboard in hand, and watched the goats hold their line at dusk without much comment beyond a raised eyebrow and a note scratched down. He didn't promise anything. He said only that the board would want to see it work when it mattered, not when it was convenient, and predators, he reminded them, didn't wait for hearing dates. The first snow came early that year, nearly 2 weeks ahead of the almanac, sweeping down off the sawtooths on a hard north wind. Gideon said it plain at supper. Whatever the goats could do, they'd need to do it now, hearing or no hearing, because the wolves would be coming down with the weather, same as they always had. The wolves came 3 nights later, in a cold that cracked the water trough ice by midnight. Wrenna woke first, not to a howl, but to the frantic, clattering rhythm of every bell on that fence line ringing at once, wild and overlapping, nothing like her slow evening pattern. She was out the door in her night clothes, Gideon 2 steps behind her with a flashlight, and what the beam caught at the fence corner stopped them both cold. The goats hadn't scattered. They'd bunched tight exactly as trained, facing outward in a ring, Clementine at the front with her head low and her horns forward, and beyond them, packing the wire at a distance they would not cross, 3 wolves circled, snarling at a wall of noise and horns they could not push through. The wolves broke off within the minute, melting back toward the tree line as the sheep, penned safe on the far side of that goat ring, stood untouched and trembling but whole. By the time the sun came up, tracks in the fresh snow told the whole story plainer than any words could, wolf prints circling the fence corner again and again, and never once crossing the line where goat hooves had packed the snow flat in a tight, deliberate ring. Odell Fescue drove out that morning after word reached him through the county line, and he stood at that fence a long while, studying those tracks with his hat pushed back, saying nothing at all. Merle Kepner came by noon with his clipboard, photographed the print pattern from 3 angles, and for the first time all season, wrote something down without a single raised eyebrow. By the following week, half of Custer County had driven out past the Tessick place at least once, slowing at the fence to see the goats still walking their evening line, bells ringing steady into the frost, as if nothing extraordinary had happened there at all. The review board met that Thursday and renewed the Tessick grazing permit without debate, noting in the record a non-lethal predator deterrent method they recommended other allotment holders study firsthand. Gideon Tessick didn't say much at the hearing. He just put his hand on his daughter's shoulder when Merle Kepner read the goats' patrol pattern into the official minutes and left it there. Word traveled slower than fire but further than most folks expected, and by winter's first real snow, 3 neighboring ranches had asked Wrenna to help train their own goats to walk a line. She still went out every evening herself, rain, shine, or hard frost, ringing that same bell, because Clementine still came to the gate expecting her. And some habits, once a family trusts them, are worth keeping long after the danger has passed. Vernus liked to say the Tessick fence line had become the only stretch of wire in the county that wolves themselves had learned to respect. And every evening at dusk, when that bell rang twice and the goats fell into their old, patient formation, it was hard for anyone in Salt Fork to remember why they'd ever called it foolish at all.